Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Today is a Training Friday edition of The Bullet, and joining me live is Tom Walls of the Firearms Academy of Seattle, as he does every other Friday. Tom, thanks for joining us today, man.
Always a pleasure, Paul. Good to see you again.
So what we want to talk about today is EDC, or if you're not familiar with the term EDC, everyday carry. That is what you carry when you leave the house. That is what you have on you every day without exception. Tom, let's start off with one thing I've said for years and years and years, and it was coined by a friend that used to be on the Polite Society podcast, Gary. Pants on, gun on. If you leave the house, my opinion is you ought to have a gun. The very, very, very bare minimum, you need to have your gun, a spare mag, and a cell phone on you. That is the absolute bare minimum, but that's really not the bare minimum, is it?
I agree with you and would add something. First off, pants on, gun on is a good rule of thumb. As I have said before, we are blessed to live in rural Lewis County, Washington, where I can't see my nearest neighbor, and he certainly would not hear me scream. So we have a firearm, my wife Diane and I, within a couple of steps no matter where we are, because people sometimes come down our driveway uninvited despite all the no trespassing signs. So your bare minimum, you got to have a gun. And that presupposes you know how to use it. We can talk about that more. But as far as equipment, a gun, and in a holster, even at bedside, we keep our guns in holsters. So when we reach, if we're not entirely awake, fingers can't hit triggers. I'm going to reach for a dummy gun here. This is a dummy gun, a replica of this particular one, a SIG 365, with a belt holster. So if I'm reaching for it at night, I can't accidentally hit the trigger. I have to very deliberately get the gun out. So presupposes a good holster. Spare ammo, cell phone. The last thing I would strongly urge you to do is have a flashlight.
Okay.
Flashlights, you need to identify the target. It's just a good thing to have, and this is the golden age of flashlights. We could do someone could qualify that we could do an hour on flashlights. They're wonderful. I'm wearing my everyday rig right now. I can reach back and I can pull out a flashlight and burn my camera out with this. It's also very nice when I was practicing pharmacy in the big box stores, the ones that start with W and S and those sorts of things. I would work nights, and the people that would see me go out knew what I had keys to. And occasionally people would come up to me in the parking lot. Now, I didn't know what their intention was. But, you know, a couple of hundred lumens in their eyeballs finds out real quick. They break my safety perimeter, my bubble. And I know what their intentions are. It's, oh, my God. If they keep coming, that's just an articulable thing. So flashlights are nice. But of the things beyond gun, I would have to say the single most important thing would be the cell phone.
Yeah. And going back to flashlights, I mean, you go to Amazon and you can get a 200 watt or 200 lumen flashlight for $15. I mean, they're inexpensive. They've got the tactical switch on the end, so you can hold it up and turn it on and off with your thumb, and it's pointed right in the direction you need it. They're very inexpensive these days, so you're not putting out a ton of money for a ton of light.
I'll spend money for the good ones. I'll try not to flash this in your camera. I'm with you. I like the button on the end. It's on and it's off. There's no strobe. If I want a strobe, all I got to do is turn it on and just wiggle it, and I can strobe. I don't have to worry about rotating the flashlight to the correct orientation. I do not like the lanyard. One trick I picked up from another instructor is the ring. This is an O-ring. This twists. I can put this around my forefinger and I can tighten it up if I've got no gloves on. And I can open my hand, do what I need to do, empty hands. flip to the back of my hand, do my gun manipulations, flip it this way, because when you drop this little black flashlight in the dark, you have dropped a black flashlight in the dark. You have a long time finding it, if indeed you have the time to find it. So yeah, so gun with a holster, and the options of holsters are endless. The cell phone. So once something happens, even if you don't draw your gun, report it. We've talked about this before. Win the race to the phone. Let the police know that you are the good guy and you're willing to sign the complaint, whatever the situation is. And in addition to that, be able to tell them exactly where you are and what you look like.
Yes.
They need to know where to send the cop car and the Navy and the machine guns and all that good stuff to come help you. And it helps if they know they're looking, in my case, for a man in his late 60s, 5'8", medium build, bald with a red shirt.
Yeah.
At which point you say, hi, thanks for coming, really glad you're here. And then proceed to communicate with them what they need to hear.
Hi, I'm the one that called you. That's the bad guy right there.
The bad guy
you
right
need
there.
to calm down.
That's going to be a thing for us, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, I'm thinking so.
My wife and I go to an extreme, being as we both teach for the Firearms Academy of Seattle. We carry cell phones with different carriers to improve the odds of it having several cell coverage if the other doesn't. That's a little out there as far as obsessive compulsive, but I don't care what you think, we do it anyway.
You know, and I don't think I'm giving away trade secrets here because I've heard him say it on national radio, but Masada Yub carries cell phones with different carriers. And I'm going to give a little bit of a clue out here. If you have, like, for example, myself, my carrier that I go with on a day-to-day basis, my regular cell phone is through AT&T. You can get what most people would call a burner phone. You can go to Walmart and buy a phone, and you don't have to put minutes on it. As long as there's a SIM card in there, you can dial 911 anywhere in the country. As long as that thing's getting signal, it will go through.
Little things like that. You know, you don't really need them until you do.
Yeah.
And it does it. I've got something similar, not to give away my stuff. I've got something similar stashed in my truck. I can power it up, and if for some reason I'm separated from my normal everyday cell phone, I've got something I can communicate to the authorities with and call in help, call in medical, call in whatever I might need. Everyday carry. Some people like to carry all the medical stuff. I think that's great. Frankly, I don't like stuff around my ankles.
Right.
In my truck, I've got what I call my hell bag. You know, things go to hell. That bag will get me out of most everything. I can fight my way home or fight my way out of whatever I need to. I've got ammo for any particular weapon I may have. Medical stuff, tourniquets, chest seals, Israeli bandages, that usual stuff. Spare batteries, spare glasses, rope, knives. I
want to go back to that just real quick if I could. Just last week, Susan and I the first time I went through EMT courses, I was 20 years old. I went through again when I was in my early 30s, and I have since let my EMT certification lapse. However, last week, Susan and I went through a Stop the Bleed course here in Sioux Falls.
How was that?
And that was, it was strictly refresher for Susan and I because both of us have been EMTs in the past. But what has happened, the tourniquets, honestly, since September 11th, 2001, since the nation has went to war, we've learned a lot in tourniquets in the last 20 years. And there's been a lot of update of information since I went through EMT school. And so, I'm really glad I went. If you haven't been to a Stop the Bleed course in like 25, 30 years, like it's been for me, it was 25 years since I'd been through EMT school since I went to this Stop the Bleed class this past week. If you haven't been recently, they're generally, you can usually find them for free or for very little money. Go find a Stop the Bleed class. Attend that class. It is well worth your time. And yeah, you can get very, again, just as like flashlights, you can get tourniquets for very inexpensive. And if you can save somebody's life, man, how much is that worth?
It's an excellent suggestion. Diane and I have been through those courses. Now, when I was a Boy Scout back in the early 60s, we were taught to use our belt, but leave it on only for a little while because it can cause damage. We know that belts are not great tourniquets. If you got nothing else, you got what you got.
And when you apply a tourniquet, leave the thing on. Let the doctor take it off.
Yeah, let the doctor take it off. You'll be fine. Thinking and techniques and things have applied. We was a class with John Murphy about a year ago, and he includes some Stop the Bleed stuff and practice with the tourniquets and with the bandages as a refresher, and we're signed up to take Dark Angel Medical here in a couple months at FAS. Excellent suggestion. Have something there. It's that denial. I was telling you before we went to air, I was talking with this delightful senior citizen lady. At my age, I have to be careful what I call senior citizen. But she's got about 11 years on me. And she's probably was a hippie in her youth. And she was asking us questions about guns. I was offering her information and trying not to enter into debate with her, which is a bad habit of mine. It became very clear that she didn't want to acknowledge the world the way that it is, with shootings at schools and churches and people being evil to each other for no reason. That I didn't hurt them, why would they want to hurt me? It was a reminder that things happen even though we don't want them to happen. Tourniquets are a great example. Again, it's like that spare magazine. You don't really need it statistically until you need it. Because as Tom Gibbons is famous for saying, it's not the odds, it's the stakes.
Yes.
Cost me nothing to carry an extra magazine, cost me nothing to have a tourniquet. I have one in our little quad. When I go out with a chainsaw, you better believe there's a tourniquet real close by.
Oh, yeah.
I think having the gear, I think that's what we're talking about, is having the gear that's easy to make sure that you have.
Well, and I'm going to stand up here for just a second, because in my right-hand pocket,
you're wearing pants today. Good for you.
Yes. Pants on, gun on. I'm not going to show the gun, but I am going to show you what's in my right-hand front pocket. And that is a very little pocket knife. Mm-hmm. If you carry a knife, as most of us adult males do you think you might have an accident with that knife? It might be a good idea to have a tourniquet. And one other thing, I was a truck, as most people know, I was a truck driver for 20 years. I always in the truck carried with me two things: firearm and extra, my everyday carry gear. And I carried what I call a go bag from my EMT days. It had just emergency medical equipment. I used my go bag, I'm going to say an average of once every between year and 18 months over my 20 years of driving. So it was almost yearly, sometimes every other year, but I used it on a regular basis and fired my gun while never had to fire the gun. So you're going to use the medical stuff a lot more statistically than you will the firearm. I want to get to a couple comments here quick. George, and I've been neglecting comments, I'm sorry, some of these are several minutes old.
See how he is, folks.
But George says, dog's cell phone, flashlight, gun. In my case, a German Shepherd mix paired with a Malinois mix for the dogs, and a Remington 870 for the gun. George, that's kind of tough to conceal, that Remington, man.
That would be an interesting holster. That said, one of my favorite home defense guns is a Remington 870 with an integral white light. We don't have dogs. I love other people's dogs. I told my buddy Morty Hayes if he should suddenly be unable to take care of his dog, his elderly dog Mac, I would take care of Mac because he's a buddy. but I'm not a dog person. I don't want I don't want the maintenance. Cats, however, really don't give a crap if somebody breaks into your house. They'll go,
Is that guy look like he's going to feed me?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry?
The cat will go, does this person look like they're going to feed me? Maybe I'll go with this person.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, body warmth and food.
Yeah.
But yeah, cell phone, flashlight, gun. The extra magazine I've mentioned before, it's not so much as having extra rounds.
Oops.
Although extra rounds are always nice to have, it's a great way to reduce the malfunction.
Yes. Charlie Chambers says, once a mobile is used, if you cancel a phone, it by law has to be able to dial 911. No carrier fees, free backups to primary phone. Yeah.
You betcha.
The only problem is, now, if you go through your closet and you find an old bag phone, guess what? They don't work anymore. For a long time they did, and they were far better than anything that you could fit in your pocket because they had much more power. But about 10 years ago, they shut the towers off that those things used, and now some of the pocket phones that are 3G are getting shut off. So you need to have, I'm going to say, a 10-year-old or less phone. You need to make sure that what you have for your backup phone is still, I know 4G and 4G LTE, and of course 5G all work. But you make sure your backup phone is still usable from time to time.
I'm sure that the manufacturers and outlets will happily sell you some.
Yes. And then I'm going to get into a few we got some comments about tourniquets. Charlie Chambers said, instead of plastic tourniquet ties, it's titanium. Plastic bends and leaks can cause a bleed out. And he says cat
the windlass, I think Charlie's talking about the technical term, windy part. There were some knockoffs coming out of China just a few years ago. The band part was okay, but the shaft, the windlass part, was a cheap plastic, and they were breaking, which is what we call a bad thing.
Yes. Yeah, when you wind that thing up and you set it inside that housing, you want to make sure that it's going to stay there.
Yeah, you got to crank on it to get enough pressure, and then you've got to lock it in place.
And then Donald says, and Donald's from the Facebook side, he says, I got a bunch of tourniquets the Israeli Defense Force uses, wrap and twist to stop bleeding. There was a time that there was a debate, and it still goes on from time to time, about use this type of tourniquet, use that type of tourniquet, but don't use X, use Y instead. Do you have a preference as to what you use?
I stick with what the experts recommend because I'm not an expert on trauma medicine. I just take the education when I can. I use a CAT tourniquet. There are other good ones out there. I know that the CAT is one. They're readily available, and we've got a crap ton of them spread around various places, vehicles, range bags, bug-out bags, trauma bags. So we probably have 8 or 10 stashed around, so I've always got one fairly close by.
Yeah.
But stick with the brand names. Take the class. Do what Paul suggested. Take the class, Stop the Bleed, or any of the top-tier instructors that include that. Get their recommendations.
Yeah, I totally agree. And some classes, the ones you pay for, will sometimes have the tourniquet as part of the class. I mean, you will get one. If not, they'll certainly probably have some for sale. There were some at the ones the class that Susan and I took, but the guy said, look, I can sell you this for X, or here's the link for Amazon. You can get it for, I think it was $18 for 2 of them, so $9 a piece. Well,
and again, get the quality stuff, because when you're there bleeding out, at that moment of realization in your life, would you pay an extra $5 to have gotten the better gear?
Yes.
It's an investment, and you don't know if that investment is going to be needed to be used, but when it does, it's real nice to have.
Well, and one other suggestion: when you get them, one time at least, practice putting it on yourself. just to know that you can. You just as if you've never drawn your gun, lined the sights up, and fired with your offhand, you're not going to be real good when you have to do it for reals. So I would recommend, for both your right arm and your left arm, once you get your tourniquet, practice putting it on one-handed. Leg, if you have to put it on your leg, you're going to have use of both hands. So. Well,
you and Susan are like Diana, and I've seen you spend so much time together. You both have trained, so you could use it on each other if need be. Can I do a cheap segue here, Paul?
Certainly.
We've talked about having this gear. We talked about having the tourniquet, but having training in how to use it, how to place it, etc. That applies to all that EDC stuff. How many times have we been in public? I think you have open carry in your state?
Yes.
We do here, and in this particular county, in our sea of blue, we're the island of red, we'll occasionally see people open carry, and I despair sometimes with the quality of holster being used. Having the gear is not like a rabbit's foot. It's not the magic, scare guys away. If you're going to rob a bank, who's the first guy you're going to shoot? The armed guard. Mm-hmm. I like, I'm the gray man. I don't want to be noticed. I will find out what my environment works and blend in. If I'm in a corporate environment, man, I got my button-down shirt. The tattoos are covered. I'm really make sure I'm groomed well, and I speak the King's English fairly well. If I'm someplace a little more relaxed, like we were this weekend, cargo pants, baggy sweatshirt, show the ink, the language falls apart a little bit. I will blend in so I don't attract attention, and that's great because when you have an armed encounter, there's the first phase, which is often the overwhelming dominance phase. They're trying to establish dominance. They'll put the gun in your face, and you have no chance to comply because you have just been bushwhacked. But as you maybe feign that, drop the gaze, all those behavioral things we can talk about sometime, they may let their guard down. We see this in videos all the time, security videos, which will give you that window of opportunity to do what you need to do. I have this cool holster, but I've never drawn out of it because how hard can that be? And I think we did, yeah, because I know you have trained extensively with that. We gave a private lesson not long ago where the dude, really, the wonderful gentleman, needed to work on his holster technique in preparation for Mag 40 that's coming up. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot more that can go wrong than you would think. So it's not just that, but working from a holster to get an efficient and safe draw through your cover garment. Oh my God.
Yes.
Remember the video of it was the church shooting 2 years ago, January, in Texas, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, Jack, the church security team. Bad guy comes in, he's wearing a trench coat, he's wearing a wig, security team is all over him. The bad guy starts the clock like bad guys do in mass shootings with the first shot with a shotgun, kills church member number 1. Church security guy number 2 reaches for his gun to draw, but he fouls his draw because of holster placement and cover garments.
Yes.
Okay, for whatever reason, God bless him, he was willing to stand up and do the right thing. Unfortunately, he lost that fight.
And lost his life in the process.
Jack Warner, I believe the gentleman's name is. So, yeah, you've got to practice with this gear. Practice having that extra magazine where you can get to it. I'm not aware of any self-defense shootings where a speed reload was the critical defining factor. But it's nice to be able to do without fumbling because I'm going to get a little shaky when I'm at somebody trying to kill me.
Right.
Have your ID in a pocket where you don't need to, put your gun down to get to it. Same thing with your phone. I'm right-handed. Here, dummy gun. This is my handgun retention gun. I don't fix my triggers. This is, my wife's got the other one. I've got my gun here, okay? I need to be able to get my cell phone with the other hand, so it goes in my left pocket, my non-dominant pocket. My ID goes in my non-dominant pocket, so I can get it if for some reason I need to have that gun out, I can still do it.
Yeah. Let's. You just said a magic word that I want to touch on in a little bit, for a little bit, as we're coming down to the bottom of the hour, and that's retention. Believe it or not, I believe that does come into EDC. More for those who choose to open carry. We live in contentious times. There are people out there who are vehemently anti-gun to the point where they will try to take your gun and shoot you with it to prove a point. If you're going to open carry, I believe you need to take a retention class, and you need to be 100% on top of your game every minute you are out in public.
We have found at FAS, and as an aside, I am the lead handgun retention instructor, and my wife Diane works with me because of our martial arts background and having done this for 15 years. Be sure that you're training with somebody that's really competent with it, not just that took the course themselves. The problem with teaching people that have no combative hand-to-hand skills is you have to teach a sense of distance, timing, reach, position, all these things within the 6 or 8 hour class that you have that's one day. It's not possible to give somebody all those skills. You can show them and then invite them back for retraining. It has to be done in a framework, a system with consistent principles.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that you can grab the gun out of somebody's holster, unless it's a retention holster. You can grab the gun out of somebody's holster very, very quickly. Even if they know you're going to do it, if you can come up behind them and they can't see you and they're going to react when they think that they need to react. We've done this in experiments with the other handgun retention instructors. It's doable. There's a certain distance you need to have. However, if they don't know you have a gun, they're less likely to go for it. So while I personally support the right to carry open, I absolutely do not support the practice. I want every advantage I can have for security, for being able to stay armed without being attacked, for that window of opportunity that may present itself. There's so many things: attack to your gun being drawn, attack to the gun in the holster. We don't have time to get into it. We really don't. Except to say, seek it out, take the training again, and practice it.
Yes. I want to get one more comment in this, going back to tourniquets. And Charlie Chambers says, pro tip, do not apply a tourniquet around the neck for a nosebleed. You're welcome.
Information I could have used earlier. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, my very first professional firearms training class ever was with Kathy Jackson. She came to Sioux Falls to do a cornered cat class. Prior to doing that cornered cat class, there was the day before the cornered cat class, she did a handgun retention class. And that was stunningly eye-opening for me.
Was Don Stolnecker with her for
yes, he absolutely was.
Don is a black belt in Danzanryu Jiu-Jitsu.
And I'm to the point where a few years after this class, 2 other trainers came up and they wanted to train other people how to take handguns away. They wanted me to be the guy that gets the handgun taken away from them, and I said, you can't do it. If I don't want you to take this gun away from me, you're not going to do it.
Pretty much.
And they tried, and I eventually had to let them have it simply because I didn't want to embarrass them.
Another thing you may find when you go to sign up for a handgun retention class, we require it at our school, is that you need to show us background check first.
Yeah.
Okay, because I've taught this to law enforcement, this is police level stuff. So understand that it's serious and you may not need it, but when you do, really nice to have, just like that flashlight.
100%. And the other thing is, if you go to a handgun retention class and they aren't checking your pockets, you're not allowed to have knives, you're not allowed to have anything. You need to be totally, absolutely, completely disarmed, because if it's not, if it's, these things are usually realistic enough that you will use anything available to you. So there you go.
What I tell students is, yeah, look, we're going to check you. You're going to have your partner search you. I'm going to wand you with a little Garrett metal detector. If you have trained to go for a weapon, I keep knives in both pockets, so if my right hand is tied up fighting with my gun, my left hand can open a knife and cut the guy off my gun. I trained to do that. I spent a lot of hours practicing that. Why would I want to spend the entire time of the class practicing not to do that? Why don't I just disarm myself, and I can simulate that by tapping a pocket to remind me. You see this every year in police training. Somebody went into a training environment that wasn't sterile, and somebody gets hurt or died.
Yeah.
So yeah, our classes like that, no, absolutely no way, double check. Pens, pencils, anything that can be used as an improvised weapon. And then you leave the room, and then you come back and you get checked again.
Absolutely. All right. Well, and I know Firearms Academy of Seattle does that for the force-on-force training. As a matter of fact, we're already long, but we're going to be just a little bit longer because I really want to tell this story again. We're doing a active shooter interdiction class. As part of this class is a force-on-force component. One of the students in this class, by the way, is Masada Yu. As we're all waiting to go through the force-on-force, I have to go down to my car to get something. I believe it was batteries for my headset, and for my my hearing protection, because my hearing protection was dead. So I go down, change batteries. I come back up. Of course, you leave. You have to get rewanded. I come back up, and Bell, when I'm coming back up, being wanded, Bell found one round of 9mm that was in my back darn pocket. Don't know how it got there, but she found it. So everybody who says you cannot, these anti-gunners who say, well, these guns will make it through metal detectors, baloney, because a 9mm round won't make it through, let alone the gun.
It's back to that safety protocol. We're not only trying to make it less likely, we want to make it damned impossible.
Yeah.
Absolute sterling.
So, all right. Well, we are, again, because I stretched for the story. We are really late, but Tom, thank you for joining us. On our way out, is there any classes coming up or anything you want to plug for the Firearms Academy of Seattle?
We have a few openings, last I heard, for Masada Yub's Mag 40 class. That's the bread and butter gold standard class. Cannot recommend it enough. If you take one training class for the rest of your life, I would have to recommend it. It is about half and half law, stuff that lawyers do not get in law school. We commonly have lawyers in the class. Half of that is shooting in his stress fire system, which shoots with a police-style qualification at the end. 20 hours of really good training. There's a few spots left. Firearmsacademy.com will get you there. Look up the classes. Can't recommend it enough. If you don't catch it with us here in the Pacific Northwest, we're about halfway between Seattle and Portland. Catch him somewhere else in the country.
It's I'm not kidding when I say this. I've been through the training multiple times. I've been through it before the stroke as the student, after the stroke as a student again, and I've hosted it many times. It is a life-changing course. And if you've been through it, go through again. I learn something every time I see Mass.
Incredible teacher, incredible memory, keeps his material up to date with the latest legal stuff. Can't say enough good stuff about it.
All right, that's going to do it for us today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Podcast listeners, thank you so much for listening. And